Again, thanks for joining. I know a lot of you guys have busy schedules. I'm going to try to make this as impactful as possible. Yes, my name is Dale Meredith, an author with Pluralsight, Microsoft trainer. I like listing all my credentials there, including my RSVP certification. That means that I can tell people I'm coming to a party on time, and I can do that PDQ. And I added OK to the end of my certifications just because I think I'm okay. Those of you that are hopefully been watching my courses before, you know that my sense of humor comes out quite a bit. But you're probably first asking yourself, exactly who is this guy? Well, as I mentioned before, and it's been mentioned, I've done several courses for Pluralsight, all focused around the cybersecurity environment. I'm currently working on their Pen Test Plus certification, and got a new course that's coming out here probably in about maybe a week, which is kind of cool. It's on non-technical attacks. But if you want to look at my background, yep, as he mentioned, I became an MCT back in 1998, been a CEH, a certified ethical hacker, as well as an instructor for EC Council since '03. I had my own wireless ISP. I live in a rural community north of Salt Lake City. It's called Syracuse, Utah. And yeah, I just doxed myself, didn't I? No, and I was introduced, well, we didn't have high-speed wireless out here, and so I set up my own business, and I learned so much from that as far as security was concerned. I've worked with the Department of Homeland Security, other government agencies, you know the drill. I could tell you about them, but then I'd have to, hurt you. I think maybe the best thing to know about me, or they always say that in order to know somebody truly, you need to understand who their friends are and who they hang out with, and yeah, me and Chuck, we go way back. And look at that smile on his face. He's just happy to be with me, isn't he? So those of you that may be aware of who I am, or maybe even follow me on Twitter, know that I love Batman. Batman is just my life. And I usually ask the question, why Batman? And I get all kinds of responses. Typically, I get the response of, he has no superpower, which is the correct answer. He's just a normal guy. I once asked this question, and somebody raised their hand and said, you witnessed your parents murdered in an alley. And I was like, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. No, but when we talk about Batman, I always tell people that we can talk about all kinds of things. Feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, I'm a huge fan. But when it comes to security, and that's what we're here to talk about, I often refer to it as it's like a box of chocolates. Remember that line? You never know what you're going to get. Well, this is actually a home that I came across just outside of Zion's National Park, and it's a beautiful home. And we typically have this tendency of looking at security from this perspective. We go through and install a bunch of security appliances. We go through and invest in software, but unfortunately, we don't see the whole picture and see where the major, I have no idea why that gate is there, because obviously this home could be easily attacked. I came across another home here. Actually, I should say the other issue that we have is when it comes to building applications for ourselves, for our companies. Whoops. This is another picture of the same location. And it, again, reminds me of security. Sometimes we open up things, whether it's services or even on a firewall, just to get something to work because we need that as a requirement, and we forget to close those holes or those gaps. There's another home that's just down the street from this particular one. This must be like the Road of Pwn. Because this is the post on their gate. I don't know if you can see this. Let me zoom up on it for you. Yeah, they just listed their email address. So they self-doxed, I think, maybe. Okay, so let's talk about how and why your company is at risk. Well, it actually goes down to a couple things. It has to deal with what I refer to as the technology triangle. And the technology triangle is built off of this, is that at one corner we have functionality, at another corner we have ease of use, and another corner we have security. Now, whether it has to do with an application or an infrastructure, trying to balance between each of these points is really difficult, because as we move towards ease of use, we lose security and functionality. As we move towards functionality, we lose ease of use and security. And as we move more to a secure environment or heavily secure environment, then we lose that ease of use and functionality. So it's a game, or I should say it's a concept that we have to really find the perfect balance. And a lot of times we don't find that balance. So let me talk to you about, first of all, one of the biggest risks that I see out there, and that is when it comes to our mobile devices. So I'm going to give you the top 8 mobile security risks. So let's take a look, first of all, at our apps. You think of our digital devices. We do more with these devices, whether it's a tablet or a phone. We put more information. It's what? Our scheduler, it's our journal, it's our entertainment, it's our therapist sometimes, right? And we forget that every app that we install typically requires you to use your account and a password. And we'll talk about, I'm sure you guys are familiar with password recycling. That's a big issue for us. But the bigger issue for me is when I'm done with an application, I actually uninstall it. So in this case here, I was on a trip, I used Lime because I like riding around the scooters. When I'm done with the trip, I uninstall it. And the reason why I do that is because I don't need any vulnerabilities hitting my device and or any updates that may expose more information without my knowledge. So you can see here, actually, I just got done. I'm uninstalling Hilton Honors. The problem is that one, it's a performance issue. The more apps you have loaded, the more information is being tracked, and the more information that more resources you're giving up. But the other issue again is that what happens if a particular application gets a data breach? And reinstalling the application isn't a big deal, especially if you use a password manager. When I'm ready to go back and use Uber, I'm going to do a trip, I just load the app and my password manager just logs me right back in. So the other issue that we have is locking down the systems. Or you know what, let me back up a second. Let's talk about what we refer to as improper session handling on these devices. The ease of use concept for a mobile device, because we want users to not be cumbered down with how technical things are. We want the app just to work. I hear that all the time. I want the app just to work. Well, many developers actually use tokens, which allow users to perform multiple actions without being forced to re-authenticate over and over. It's kind of similar to our passwords. They're generated by the app as well as by as a way to identify that particular device. So secure apps generate new tokens with each access attempt. And it's hard for us to understand, well, which platform are they following? Are they just reusing the token, or are they creating a new session token every time? And until companies are willing to give out that information, I don't know, that's going to be a problem. So I'm always monitoring what applications are going to maybe in the news as far as a breach is concerned. The other issue too for me is the updating issue. So you can all admit this. I'll admit it. I've done it in the past. When we get the updates, which button do we hit? Especially when there's like 15 of them. Yeah, we hit the update all. Now, in some devices, it doesn't tell you that. Let's just say, for example, Fing here on my screen here, they may change what access they need to my device. All of a sudden, they want access to my contacts. And a lot of times they do pop up and say, we need access to your contacts, but we've become so conditioned with these mobile devices, it's almost like installing a new program. Our users, as well as ourselves, are going next, and we skip the part that they want now access to our contacts. So I always tell people, make sure that you review what the update is. In this case here, I've opened up Gboard or the Google keyboard to find out what it is they need access to before I apply that update. We also have number 2 on my list is VPN avoidance. When it comes to this, we all know what VPNs are, right? And we do VPNs with our computers, but how many of us are doing VPNs with our mobile devices? I personally have a if this then that script that runs on my phone. As soon as I leave my house, it first of all turns off the Wi-Fi on my phone. And second of all, if I jump on the internet, my VPN implements right away. So again, we all need to understand the concept about VPNs, that it makes our data more secure, what we're doing. And it's a big issue right now in the news. In fact, there's a great Netflix documentary that just hit the binge department in my book. It's called The Great Hack, and it's basically based off the Cambridge Analytics issue. And they talked about how they were actually collecting data even though they weren't on Facebook, the individuals. So by using a VPN, we can actually avoid that. Number 3 is our wireless connections. This is one of my true loves, or maybe hobbies, and it has to deal with me being in that wireless ISP service. But we don't connect to networks just because they're there. And when you connect to a network, the default setting on most of our devices is to connect automatically. You'll notice here, the Davis Conference Center, I don't check that box. In fact, on my phone, when I come home, I have to connect manually. And I know it's a hassle. That goes back to that whole ease of use concept. But it takes me just a couple of seconds to connect. And I'll tell you why we do that here in just a second. The other issue I want to talk about is free Wi-Fi or open Wi-Fi access points. Do not hook in to an open network without a VPN. That goes back to rule number 2, right? Always use a VPN. And we never hook up to a network without a VPN. Well, I should say it this way. If you're going to hook up without a VPN, it better be your own network, because I'm a firm believer in, if it's not your network, it may not be your device anymore. Now, this is something I usually do when I'm in front of a live audience. I know you guys are all live, but we're not here together. I actually will get to the conference a little early, and I'll sit down and fire up my Kali Linux box and do some error monitoring and pull up which phones or which devices are scanning for networks that they'd been hooked into. This was my last conference that I went to. This was actually for a particular company. It wasn't even a conference. It was a conference for a company. And these were all the access points that the phones were looking for, the devices were looking for. Now, here's what's interesting. When you make that check mark to connect automatically, your phone, and this is an issue of the vendor or the manufacturing of the phone, they want to make sure that customers don't perceive their device as being slow. And so as soon as it becomes available, they hook in. Well, the problem with this is that I can easily fire up what we refer to as an evil twin. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. What's interesting is I actually did this presentation with the conference. And after the conference, I had actually 3 gentlemen come up to me and they said, you displayed our access point. And we have our Wi-Fi turned off. How did you do that? Well, how I did that is I mentioned before, even though you turn off the Wi-Fi, vendors want their phones and their services to be determined or to be looked at as being very quick. Think about when you initially hook into a Wi-Fi network. It takes a good 15 seconds for you to actually make the connection and get online. When you turn off your Wi-Fi on these phones, on most of our devices today, it's actually scanning still in the background. And so it was, like I said, it was an interesting conversation with these gentlemen. Told them what was happening. And the way to get around this, by the way, is to purchase a phone that is a vendor-free phone, meaning I don't go to T-Mobile to buy a phone, or I don't go to Verizon to buy a phone. I buy maybe like a Google Pixel or a phone that's not tied to a vendor, because they load up and they prepare their systems or the operating systems that they install on our devices in a way that benefits them, which could compromise our security. Okay. Next up, we have the evil twins. So the evil twins is this concept. We know that these devices are looking for access points that they've connected to. Let's take H honors. It's a very popular one. And when we make a connection to, like when I go to a Hilton hotel, hey, if I've got that check to connect automatically, I connect up. The issue here is that, again, with that same laptop that I have in the conference, I just simply say, hey, guess what? My laptop is now H honors. And so I become the evil twin. And what happens, even though I'm not even near Hilton, what happens is that, I think I got a slide. Hang on. There we go. What happens is that whichever signal is stronger, even if you're hooked into, I don't know, let's say again, we're at a conference, you're hooked into the conference network. If my laptop or my device is closer to you, the phone is going to associate to the access point that has the stronger signal. And what happens? Think about what, again, go back and think about what we're talking about with what information we put on our phones. Immediately, I mean, your social networks, they're logging in all of a sudden. Bank apps, games, all this information is going to pass through my system. And I'm going to collect that information. And yes, this happens quite a bit. We all know in coffee shops, right? We always hear about that. So that's an issue for us, is making sure that, and again, I'm going to pass you on through to the cloud or to the internet. So everything that you're doing is going to just pass through my device. It's also a man-in-the-middle attack combination. Okay. And these devices, it doesn't have to be my laptop. And I can put these, as a matter of fact, I don't even have to be present. This is a TP-Link router. Yeah, it's really small, as you can tell. This one you can actually flash with some firmware that turns it into a hacking device. There's actually a company that's made, that sells this device pre-programmed. They actually stick a label on top of it and call it their Wi-Fi attacker. We also have, obviously, some of the more popular devices out there. Some of you guys may be familiar with this one. It's the Wi-Fi Pineapple. But hey, I use Raspberry Pis all the time because, again, it's a full system. It's got Wi-Fi built into it. And you're thinking, yeah, but Dale, how are you going to hide that? Well, very easily. This is a fake case. It looks like what an air diffuser, maybe what's it called? Yeah, a diffuser that puts out a smell, right? And I can just simply place that somewhere inside. I can put the Wi-Fi, or I can put the Raspberry Pi. It has its own cables in it to hook up to the Raspberry Pi so that the lights in the front activate, and I can charge or provide power to a to a Raspberry Pi via just a power bank, and then just come back in later and collect it up. Okay, number five on our top 8 list. We're counting them down. So number 5 is our ingenious phishing attacks. I know we see this all the time, and you know what? They're getting trickier and trickier. Let me give you an example. So I do a lot of training throughout the United States, and one of the training locations that I go to is actually based out of Denver. And I got this email from Sharon. It's my contact there, and it said, hey, please let me know if you have any questions or need anything else. And you'll notice that it has her tag at the bottom, her signature, and that is her. In fact, this is her email address. And I was like, first of all, I always ask my question, was I expecting this email? And in this case here, I'm like, no. So I responded back, one question, what's this about? And here's what's interesting is that they responded back, it's not a virus. Please review the document and let me know. And I'm like, huh. So what I did is I opened it up in a virtual machine, and this is what I got. Yep, it was a deceptive site was where I was going to go to. So I actually called Sharon and said, did you mean to send me that? And she had no idea what I was talking about. So again, they're getting very, very ingenious. My wife with her company, she got an email the other day that looked like it was from her headquarters, and it said, hey, we got some new dress code. Because of the heat, there's some new dress code exceptions. So you can stay cool. Make sure you review the attached document, otherwise you could be in violation of our dress code policy. And there was a link, and it was from the dress code team at her company. And she's like, we don't have a dress code team. And sure enough, Yep, it was a phishing attack. Now, phishing attacks have gotten to the point where it's now starting to affect businesses in a major way. Some of you may have heard of Locker Goga. It took down Hydro, which is a huge aluminum manufacturing company, and this took place last year. And it took down everything. They got inside of their whole environment. It was a piece of ransomware. But it was all started by a phishing attack. What's really scary is this is what it did. It actually went through and on the local accounts, the local admin account, it changed the password. The security endpoints and antivirus didn't detect it. It then disabled the NICs after it infected everything and passed on so that you couldn't get into the machine remotely. And it went through and encrypted the file systems, DLLs, Office files, and here's the kicker, it got onto their domain controllers. And Active Directory is just simply a file, and so it encrypted their entire domain infrastructure. It's kind of funny, that particular story, they were somewhat able to recover somewhat quickly because they had one server that was offline, and it was in South Africa somewhere. It just happened to be offline. And it did not get infected. How they got in after they did the phishing attack, they were able to use NetLogin or the sysvolume to replicate their attack through all the domain controllers. They just simply scheduled a task and said make that task run from the sysvol folder, which got replicated all the domain controllers. There is a possibility they used psexec, which is a free tool that's out there as well. Once it executed, it used every core of the CPU and every thread that it could, and it would encrypt a domain controller in less than 4 minutes. So yeah, oops, sorry, I got a text message up there. Apologize for that, folks. Should I get back with her? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, number 6, IoT. It's the new attack vector, folks. It's kind of scary. The number of attacks that are hitting us now because of these smart devices is incredible. In fact, we know that because of IoT, the target attack or the target breach took place. If you're not familiar how they got in, we all know that they got into their Visa machines, all the retail locations, but the attackers were able to get in through a third party that was monitoring the HVAC systems for all the targets. And they just simply used the HVAC system or that login and pivoted off of that particular system onto other systems, eventually made their way within the credit card network, well, the same network. They had everything on the same production network, which is a nightmare. So, oh yeah, recently, actually I would say last year, city of Chicago, right? Everybody's heard about that one? Not Chicago, Atlanta, got my cities mixed up there. They got hit with a ransomware. And it took them down. They're still trying to recover, and they've spent something like $30 million. I don't think $30 million is anybody's IT budget for the year, right? They got in, the attackers got in through a video conferencing projector that they used in the courtrooms. You know, when a defendant is maybe appearing from jail. Yeah, they got in through that device, which is kind of scary. Most recently, we have a casino in Vegas. They won't tell us which one it was, but attackers got in through a thermostat. A thermostat. Oh, it gets better. The thermostat was in a fish tank. Yeah. So obviously, to mitigate IoT as an attack vector, you got to get these devices off your production networks, put them on their own networks, completely isolate them. Okay, number 7, other wireless issues, or I should say connectivity. Now, when it comes to, oh, that reminds me, you know what, I'm actually working on a presentation going back to our IoT stuff. I'm cracking in via Christmas lights. Anybody ever seen those permanent Christmas lights that people put on their homes so they don't have to take them down? They can play with them from their phones. They can. The reason why I'm doing this is because I've installed it and I found out that the username and password is blank. So I'm going to pivot and get into a production environment. And these are being installed on retail locations. Kind of funny. Well, it's not funny. It's eye-opening. So other wireless, NFC. So you know when you hit airplane mode, did you know that NFC doesn't turn off? A lot of people don't. In fact, I turn off my NFC all the time, and I only turn it on when I need to use it. Again, it goes back to that ease of use functionality of that technology triangle. As I move towards it, I lose my security. So this is actually me on a plane, and people are walking past me, and their Bluetooth are on. I know we all use Bluetooth for headphones, right? But there's actually I actually get a tile. Yeah, there's a tile device that walked past me. There's also some of these are going to be laptops that have Bluetooth on. A lot of times users don't know that they have Bluetooth on their laptops, and that maybe it's still active. So in a matter of just a couple of minutes, I was able to collect enough information about different Bluetooth devices in my vicinity. With a 4-hour flight, I could have some fun. I didn't. Okay. Number 8, BYOD. Bring your own disaster. No, I get it. Listen, I know people are used to using their mobile devices, their personal devices, and it's a cost-saving issue, right? Kind of, sort of, for the companies because they don't have to provide the devices. The issue here is that we start granting users higher level access on these devices that are personal. In some cases, we don't control them. Sometimes we do control them. But it basically, well, and what we're starting to see happen as well is that these devices are starting to replace desktops. People are using their tablets more often. And these devices typically don't offer the same level of built-in security or control that we get with our desktop environments. So again, this goes back to the whole triangle, ease of use. I'm not saying that, and I know some of you guys may be out there going, Dale, we have a solution to help us with BYOD that helps control their devices, but to me, it's just another vector because that's just another something that can go wrong very quickly. And we're going to see more and more attacks coming at our mobile devices because, listen, the attackers know that we're using our devices. So the question comes up, who in your organization are the biggest offenders? Everybody. No, it's not who you think. We actually need to kind of look in the mirror. I don't know how many times I've been on engagements where I find out that IT folks are using the same password for all their devices, for all their infrastructure devices. Again, we fall into this trap. We feel like we're invincible. It's not going to happen to me, right? It's kind of like raising a teenager. Isn't that their attitude? It's not going to happen. And of course, then it happens. So again, the other issue that we have is that our teams aren't staying on the cutting edge. And that's really kind of hard to do, to be honest with you, because there's so much going on within our environment, within this environment. There's no other environment. Sales guys, sales are sales. Marketing's marketing. HR is HR. But IT changes hourly, sometimes minutes. Again, because of these changes, we've got to somehow stay up on this. So I ask this question, and that is, are you leveling up? Do you know where everyone's skill level is? And in fact, we probably need to take this back. I'm going to show off a free feature with Pluralsight where you can go and take a skill assessment test. It's called Pluralsight IQ. And you can see where your skill stands. And this way here, you can actually, I take that back. Sorry, it's called Skill IQ, not Pluralsight IQ. Skill IQ. Again, it's a free service that you can go through and take a look, and you can see truly where you're at. And the cool thing about this is that after you're done, and they've got skill sets or free assessments for obviously hacking, security, AWS, cloud security, we really need to understand where our team's knowledge is based. And so I would actually look at it bringing this into the HR world as well. Every employee should have this part of their employee development plan. When you do the one-on-ones, check in. What are you doing with your skills? Matter of fact, what have you learned today? Actually, that would be a great motto to have, right? What have you learned today or this week or this year? In the hallways, start asking other members of your team, hey, what'd you learn today? Because the fact that this changes so fast, we've got to be on that cutting edge. Now, the reason why I talk about this quite a bit is because of the fact that our teams have this tendency of not being in a culture of continual learning, and we need to be. Again, our teams or our subject matter, is that what I want to go? Our departments, and I'm coming up with the wrong word here. Our industry changes so fast that we need to be in this process of continual learning. And I don't care where you get the learning from. I just want you to stay current. Okay. And if you don't stay current, then you may be in trouble, because let me tell you, folks, there's a new generation that's coming. It's a generation that is being brought up where the internet has always been. Some of you guys may be in that generation. They're living in a world where they're raised with technology all around them. Let me show you an example here. This is my grandson on a flat screen TV. My daughter she's Chromecasting Netflix, and he's choosing a show. He thinks it's a tablet. She's just manipulating it with her phone, but he immediately associated this device as being something that he knows the interface. And he's 4, maybe 3 here. I'm getting old. I can't remember them all. Now, I want you to listen carefully. This is my nephew.
I don't know how you... What happened?
You can't show a kid how to buy a thing and then just a little kid how to buy stuff online and then just walk away. You have to like change the cover or put it or hide it in somewhere or do something.
Who showed you how to buy stuff on Amazon?
You showed me where the app is, and then I figured out how to do it.
With what? Did you use the password?
I typed in random numbers, and then I figured it out. I typed in random numbers. Except I closed my eyes and typed in random numbers.
No, I don't think that's what happened.
There was an H in it.
Oh my gosh.
So what he is saying there, if you didn't follow it all, he's saying you can't show a kid how to buy something on Amazon and expect him not to do anything with that. And she said, well, how did you figure out the password? And his first response, come on, trying to close down that video window here. His first response was, I just typed in a bunch of random numbers. And she pauses for a second, and he kicks back and says, well, actually, I closed my eyes and just typed. And she said, I don't think that's what's happened. That's what happened. And he goes, well, there's an H in it. Okay, this guy, when he grows up, he's on my security team because he obviously shoulder surfed, and he did it really well because he ordered $1,800 worth of Pokemon. Yeah. Thank heavens it was Amazon. They did get a refund. But this is the generation that's coming. Again, they're going to be very attuned to this industry and very attuned to the technology. Some of us didn't grow up with it around. We had to learn it as it came. It's a part of our lives now, and we need to start protecting ourselves as well as protecting our companies and our resources. Okay, so I think we're going to do some questions, some Q&A, if you guys have got any Q&A. How do you pick a VPN service? It's not a trivial thing to pick a good provider. That's a great question. So here's, okay. Just because I don't see the black helicopters circling doesn't mean they're not there. I'm not a big conspiracy guy. When it comes to VPN service, the issue that you have to think about is, yeah, you got to pick a good provider. And for your company, you've got to determine what is important. Here's the issue that I have sometimes is that a lot of any VPN service provider within the United States has some legal obligation to share information with government agencies. Dun, dun, dun. I personally use a VPN service where their company is not based in the United States, but they do have servers here, and because they're not based out of the United States, they don't have to record that information, and therefore they wouldn't be able to give it up. So that's the biggest thing for me for VPN service. But for companies, you guys need to probably be aware of or be looking at things like functionality. I haven't had any problems with it. I'm probably going to be asked which one. The one I personally use is private internet, PIA, private internet access. Okay, how should we select a password manager / vault? Listen, this one here I'm gonna be really generic about, because you want to find one that's gonna, all of them do a really good job. I haven't seen one that does something better than another. I know that Troy Hunt, anybody familiar with Troy Hunt? He's an author here at Pluralsight. He's also known for his website, Have I Been Pwned? He's actually working with FirstPass, where when you type in your password, if you decide to type in your own password, by the way, I never type in my own passwords. I let it auto-generate for me. It'll tell you if that password's been pwned already. I personally don't use that one. I use the one that's called LastPass, and I just thoroughly enjoy it quite a bit. Let's see, what steps can you take as an admin to require the use of VPN or disable the ability? Man, I wish I could read these. I can't scroll down. It's really weird, the interface. Oh, wait, I'll mouse down here. Let's see. Disable the ability to.
Hey Dale, if you pop up there should be a way to expand that box.
Aha.
And then if you click on it.
There we go. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Sorry, different interfaces for different webinars, folks. Let's see, let me go back up to the VPN one here. Oh no, did that one? Okay, so let me go. I'm going to go down in order here. Well, how do you feel about MAM versus MDM? Large companies who can't afford to issue company-owned devices. Do you think that MAMs is a viable option? Been looking at, yeah. So again, here's the question I would always present to the company, because again, a lot of times executives don't understand. They look at the bottom line as far as BYOD is concerned, and that is, and I hear this all the time, that they can't afford. Can they afford the breach? Again, I go back to look at the city of Atlanta. I'm sure they could not, or they did not want to spend $30 million recovering things. That wasn't done by BYOD, but I definitely recommend some type of, I'm a big fan of MDMs myself, but I'm a Microsoft guy, so, you know. What steps can you take, what steps can you take as an admin to require the use of a VPN to disable the ability to connect automatically? That's going to be the VPN provider themselves if they offer that feature. Sometimes you can get away with, like I said, there's some stuff out there for if this then that you can utilize, but you can't really enforce that. It comes to training, and I know that even though users get trained, they don't always follow the rules after they've been trained. But there's got to be some, to me, there's got to be some bite behind not following. Maybe in their performance review that comes back up, but that's just me. Let's see, about evil twins. For it to catch the connection being made to a social network, etc., the network has to be, the network in being emulated would have to be a passwordless network. Am I right? If it's one of those WP networks, it wouldn't authenticate. Yeah, that's, yes, if it's a WPA network. I'm talking about like H honors isn't necessarily a WPA2. Some of them are, but you just got to be careful. That's why I say be careful about open. Oh man, open networks just kills me sometimes. So yeah, but again, I don't know if you guys have seen, but WPA2 has been cracked. So it's just the issue that we have, especially when it comes with attacks and security, is that the attackers have something we don't have. Once I capture data, I have time on my hand, on my side. I have months that I can go back, and that's why we typically don't hear when we hear about a breach. We don't hear about it till months afterwards. One, because the company's not on the ball, and two, because the attacker's taking his time to go through that information. Let's see, if users do not have permission on the PC to install programs or change system files settings, will they protect themselves from most viruses and attacks? No. Sorry, to be that blunt, because most of these are now coming through web interfaces, unless you're blocking browsers. Some are coming across as an email attachment, and it's attached, it's a macro within Excel. So it might slow them down. As a matter of fact, that's a quote I always use all the time. Your job is, as a security professional, is to slow down an attacker. You can never stop them. You can only slow them down and make it more discouraging. How is quantum computing going to affect security? You know, I don't know, to be honest with you, Mark. Here's what I usually find is that, you know, when artificial intelligence started to first come out, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be the solution for security. I'm like, well, artificial intelligence is just going to be used by attackers as well. I mean, it's not like it's a top secret thing that nobody else can use. Quantum computing, I think, is going to be a big thing for us. I actually think that on the mobile device side, 5G is going to be really kind of cool, just in the aspect that it uses multiple connection points, is my understanding. I was just reading an article about it on Wired the other day, and I was like, oh wow, that's going to be cool. It'll help secure things a bit. Are iOS devices as secure as I'm told? You're asking an Android guy. They are secure. I'll be honest. They're secure, but don't get in that. They're not totally secure. We see just as many apps out there. In fact, I think the last stat that I saw that there was something like 200 million apps that have been pulled off of all the different Play stores because they were not what they were supposed to be. I know that Apple does a really good job of screening those, but even then we've seen issues in the past where something's gotten past them. So I remember the commercials back in the day. I'm a PC and I'm a Mac commercials. Anybody remember those? One of the things that they used to say is, you know, we don't get viruses. Well, obviously that's changed. So it's just a matter of time. And there's that time issue again. During the VPN also, does the VPN also protect on rogue facno cells, spelt wrong? Oh, personal cell towers. Often going to certain conferences. Yeah, I use a burner phone. You know what? I do that too. In fact, we got Daniel. Got time for a story?
We always have time for your stories, Dale.
Okay. Once when I was a little kid. No. I was at I was at DEF CON. I'd gone to Black Hat. This happened 2 years ago. Went to Black Hat, went to DEF CON, and as I'm walking to DEF CON, I take my cell phone and I turn it into airplane mode. I'm like shutting down everything because I just wanted to take my phone so I could take pictures. I wasn't going to make any calls or anything. And I go into the bookstore department area, their vendor area, and I buy some books. And I've got a bag with me, and I go over to a table that's just off to the side. I start putting my books in my bag. My phone is in my pocket, and a gentleman walks up to me and he says, "Hey, what do you got there?" And you know, I'm a nice guy. I'm like, "Oh, found some really cool books." And I look at him, and I realize that something is up. It's the social engineering side of me that comes out, because as I'm talking to him, he's not looking at me. He's looking elsewhere. And all of a sudden, my phone vibrates in my pocket. This is where I discovered the NFC issue. He used NFC to turn the Wi-Fi back on my phone. So yeah, burner phone or just turn everything off. But no, I don't think A VPN, if you make that connection, you should be, I'm going to say you're okay, because the VPN itself is going to encrypt along the way, and that would be really hard. And boy, unless somebody knows something different that I don't. How are you able to confirm that the email was a phishing attempt? Which, Henry, which one? Oh, how are you able? I do it a couple different ways. First of all, like I said, I always ask myself, did I expect this? Especially like the one example I showed you where it's like, hey, review this document and let us know. And I'm like, we haven't talked. What are you talking about? I don't have a class coming up. Usually it's a contract, because they want me to come teach. But I always ask myself, first of all, who is this person? I always look at the headers, right? Who it's from. Even though it says it's from Bill Gates, I see that it's from a Gmail account, so that doesn't make sense to me. But again, I'm probably most of us here are probably also more experienced with this, and so we know what to look for. The issue here is we've got to teach our users how to do that. How to, again, don't be complacent. That's my other thing that kills us, is when we're complacent, we goof up things.
Dale, do you maybe want to go into, you mentioned in your example before using a VPN and kind of how you figured out that one phishing attempt. Talk maybe about that method just a little bit more.
So the as far as the VPN is, I'm confused by the question there, Daniel. Sorry.
Sorry, sorry, not VPN. No worries. You gave the example before of how you figured out that one that replied, it's not a,
Another virus.
Whatever. Yeah.
For them to say that,
yeah,
threw a flag up in my head. And like I said, in that particular situation, I wasn't expecting anything from Sharon at the time. And this happens all the time with internal mail. And we have to be very, very careful. In fact, hey, I'm going to do a plug for my new course coming out, guys. Or folks, sorry. I'm an old school guy. I say guys, I mean everybody. We talk about phishing attacks and the most common headers, which are typically urgent. What's the an image from somebody at something.com, so we think that there's an image attack, or please review. So again, maybe it's just me being trained, and I'm not in an internal office environment. I'm my own guy, and so I don't get a lot of emails for myself to schedule a meeting. But as an example, if Pluralsight reached out to me and said, hey, if I got an email from somebody at Pluralsight saying, hey, will you review this document? My first question would be, any attachment, any link, I don't hit them. In fact, if there's a link in the email and they've been nice enough to actually show the link, the link actually shows https. I'm just going to use this as an example, amazon.com. I won't click on that link, but I'll highlight that link, copy the text, and paste it into a browser. Because if I click on that link, just because it says it's going to amazon.com doesn't mean it's going to amazon.com. Does that help?
Yep, that's awesome.
Okay. See, Daniel's making some notes, I can tell. Do you use products like Deep Freeze? I've used it in the past. There are some, so that your only solution when it comes to I'm assuming this is going back to like ransomware and malware and stuff. Yeah, you've got to have something in place to be able to recover quickly. Microsoft used to have a solution, Steady State, but they discontinued it. I don't know why. But yeah, that I've worked with several clients that use that particular product, and it seems to do really well for them, Robert. Let's see. Anna says, is there a way to tell which apps on our phone is doing something suspicious behind the scenes? Anna, the only way to do that is to actually have your phone go through a proxy. Like I set up a proxy on my laptop if I suspect an app, if I'm doing some research, and I'll have my phone connect up to it. And so it basically is a sniffer for me. And that's basically the only way to tell if you want to know before it breaks on the news that there's a problem. Let's see. Tony's asking, is the traditional antivirus solution outdated given the more advanced threats with AI? Should we be looking more for sophisticated tools instead of in conjunction with a standard AV? Oh man, see, I'm going to try to, okay, so I'm not selling a product here, folks. I'll be honest with you. I don't have antivirus on my system. I haven't for several years because, again, I know I have what's built into Windows 10 in this case. Which is the Defender product. And because I'm very, very careful, that's just my mindset. I think that the AV providers out there, in fact, I'll be excited to see what happens here to talk to folks at Black Hat in 2 weeks, that the AV folks are going to be using AI. I know a lot of them do it right now to help mitigate some of those threats, but I think traditional AV antivirus, it has its moments, I guess. I also look at it based off of a risk level. If I have, my favorite is when my nephew comes to me, another nephew, not the one you saw, comes to me and says, "Hey, Uncle Dale, something's wrong with my laptop." And I start looking at the laptop, and they're doing things like BitTorrent, and they have, where'd you get your antivirus from? It's the Enterprise Edition of McAfee, and they're like, "Yeah, I got it off of torrent." I'm like, "Yeah, that was smart." So, knowing where we get our sources or our solutions, our software is another big thing. I'm a big fan of, when the company wants to deploy something, they do it through their own. Let's say, again, I'm a Microsoft guy, but like SCCM allows us to create a menu for them to install their apps. Don't allow them to install apps that they just don't know what they're doing. And the same thing would apply, I guess, with our phones as well, or mobile devices. Let's see. We all use several passwords for different websites and accounts, and obviously this is not possible to remember them. How do we keep it safe and in place? Yeah, so the answer to that one is a password manager. My last check with my LastPass was I have 350 passwords associated to 350 websites or apps. And every time I sign up for something, I allow it to create the randomized password. What's great is that when I hear of a breach, let's say that Facebook gets a breach, in the case of LastPass, I can just go in and say, change my password. It logs in to Facebook, does the password change for me, and then records the new password. My only issue that I have with password managers, listen up, everybody. The master password has to be difficult. Do not use a common password there. Matter of fact, here, I'll give you, this is a freebie for you folks. Ready? Daniel's my screen still being displayed?
Yep, I see a notepad up right now.
Sweet. So I always tell people, when you want to come up with a difficult password, excuse me, use a syntax we are already aware of. How about this? No, that's not one of my passwords. Or maybe, see, I need to meet the complexity issues. So there we go. This is easy to remember. If it's seen going across in clear text, an attacker, if they don't look at it closely, they're going to just think it was a DNS request. So again, come up with a long password for that master password. Again, one of the favorite things or favorite features about LastPass is that it reminds you that your master password hasn't been changed, and it can help you change it as well. So yeah, make sure that that password recycling is a big issue.
Was that your home Wi-Fi password, Dale?
Yes, actually, no, that's Gotham. Okay. Let's see. Have you seen an article on CNET where more than 1,000 Android apps harvested data even? Yes. Yeah, I did see that, Alfred. Ooh, Alfred, I like you. Yeah, I did see that. It's kind of crazy. Another question. Do you have any reference guides for using. Sorry, I'm reading it. I'm assuming everybody can see it. The question is do you have any reference guides for using if this then that for VPN settings? Stephen, reach out to me personally. My email address is not listed there on the screen. It's easy. It's dale.meredith@gmail. That's my public email. You can send me all the garbage you want, and I'll ignore it. I think there was, somebody asked, I missed this one. Can you summarize the top 10 again? I think I only had 8. Did I say 10? I know, you're like, I don't have them written down, folks, sorry. So number 8 is BYOD. Number 7 is our wireless connections. Making sure that we're aware. That's the issue too, is that I like I said, people say, I just love my phone because it just works. Well, we need to understand how they work, what they're doing. Matter of fact, one of my least favorite features is when you turn on GPS. The default in Android is to, if you select what do they call it, like really, what's the word I'm looking for here? When you turn on your GPS, it says, do you want to be really accurate? And people hit yes all the time. What they don't realize they're doing is they're turning on Wi-Fi. And then Google is using access points that they have mapped out to help pinpoint your location. And I always turn that off. Let's see, 6, IoT. Making sure you guys know how to mitigate that. Again, big thing here with IoT is getting them off your production environment and testing things beforehand. So I'm going backwards here on the slide. 5 are phishing attacks. Make sure you start training your users on phishing attacks. Listen, back in the old days, hacking was really easy. It was really difficult because we had to hack past firewalls, routers, get into a domain controller. Listen, it's a lot easier for me to send out an email, mass email, and if I can get 1% to click on the link and that link launches a malicious program that opens up a reverse shell for me, that is so much easier than going through all that problems. And that's why we're seeing so many more attacks, is because it's becoming more and more easier. Evil twins was number 4. I know they're evil. Again, that's the router that duplicates itself, or it looks like another wireless router that you've hooked into. Our wireless connections, I always tell people, if you don't need it, we don't have to be connected all the time. Turn it off. If you're going to, when I travel through an airport, my wireless is turned off. My Bluetooth is turned off. Yes, I have a pair of Bluetooth headphones, but when I'm traveling, I don't need to be using those headphones. If I got a call coming in, I can always turn it on. I know it's not convenient, Dale. Ooh, there's that convenient thing again. Number 2 was the VPN avoidance. We have this tendency of, and I know VPNs sometimes slow things down a bit, but I'd rather be safe than slow. And then number 1 is app management. I think this is like primary. Manage those apps. My kids, drives them crazy as they've grown up. I've got 1 caboose left in my house here, and I know exactly what app he's installed and what apps he's uninstalled. And so I guess I do have my own little network infrastructure or my own environment. It's my kids. Okay, so I think that's all I've got for you guys.
And with that, Dale, I just wanted to give you the chance to maybe leave one final takeaway with those that are here.
You know, I think the takeaway is this. I'm often reminded about when I grew up. My dad came home with a, this is going to age me a lot, a Betamax machine. I know some of you guys are like, Betamax. We'll just say a VCR. How's that? And he plugged it in, and the clock started blinking, and he couldn't figure out how to change it. And so he turned to me and said, "Can you figure this out?" And I'm like, "I'm on it." And of course, I was able to change it. And every time the power went out, I had to change it. And it's the same thing that's happening today. A lot of times people we're buying devices that we truly don't understand how to work. We can't be that person that just buys it and says, "Oh, it works. That's cool." we have to understand what's happening on the back end. That includes not just devices, but as we've talked about today already as well, apps. We have to know what data that they're grabbing. What are they sharing? What are we giving up? We are the commodity for these free services, for these apps that are out there. And so just being aware of that and teaching our users about that, I think would be my big takeaway. Daniel, I'm really upset. You mentioned Ellen DeGeneres is going to be at live. Adam Savage. You didn't mention me.
Well, I was saving that to the end. That was the big reveal at the end of this webinar. Yes, Dale will be there. Dale, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're planning to do at Pluralsight Live?
Yeah, so mine's more of a kind of a hobby, fun thing. Last year I did a session that was really popular about creating a mobile security station using a Wi-Fi, using a Raspberry Pi, and made it. It obviously has like a 7-inch touch screen. We loaded Kali Linux on it. We did some demonstrations of the wireless. This year we're going to update that one because we've got a new version of Raspberry Pi that's come out, as well as I've got a cluster of pies. That just makes me hungry now. So that's what my session is going to be on. I'll be there. If any of you folks that are coming out, please come up and say hi to me. I love meeting viewers, and yeah,